Devil May Cry 5 seems to have learned nothing from all the other games that have been rapidly expanding and revitalizing the action genre. In a post-Bayonetta world, Devil May Cry 5 had a lot to prove to assert itself as a relevant mainstay against its contemporaries, but what's here feels like a snapshot of when the series was unrivaled in skillful, stylish combat, entertaining set pieces, and a main character that upheld an iconic status even when a series was in stasis.
Guess I get to see it with my own eyes. If it really is you.
Some of Devil May Cry 5's biggest problems start because its refusal to use said main character. Dante takes a backseat once again to Nero, the younger, spunkier of the two demon hunters who debuted in Devil May Cry 4. Unlike previous games, by the time DMC5 starts the cataclysmic event that is spawning demons and devils into the real world, Nero, whose role in a lot of the story is tangential at best, felt like an outsider of a larger story I had to spend much of the game without any real context or motivation. Devil May Cry hasn't always had the most consistent stories, but it's always been good about grounding character motivations in the midst of chaos. DMC5's story, on the other hand, is split between three perspectives, and its non-linear execution of the story makes it feel fractured, and harder to follow and invest in, even as a person who has grown to care about these characters across 5 games. This fractured state extends to the writing, as DMC5 feels caught between two versions of itself, one side that leans into the gothic and darker vibe of the original games, and the edgelord antsy side of the reboot. Nero in particular channels Reboot Dante's insufferable attitude at several points, which again makes me wonder why the game leans so hard into him as the primary playable character. Longtime fans will be interested in the closure it provides to some threads dating back to the first game, but even as I found myself drawn in by the end, I was still disappointed at just how safe it all felt. That sense of safety bleeds into the way DMC5 plays as well. Both Nero and Dante's playstyles draw heavily from DMC4 and DMC3 respectively. So much so that I found my muscle memory kicking in on several occasions, despite not having played either game in over a decade. Between the two, Dante fares better, mostly due to the variety of his moveset. He's the character who I could experiment with the most, with 4 fighting styles to swap between on the fly and multiple short and long range weapons. Every moment I played as Dante felt like it could be different from the last. Some of his tools were outlandish and a ton of fun, including a motorcycle that's separated into dual wielding melee weapons. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to play as Dante anywhere near as much as I want. Clearly, a lot of work went into Dante's ability set, but it feels so underutilized compared to the other two that it doesn't color the game as a whole. Nero, on the other hand, is a star of close to half of DMC5's 20 levels. On paper, his arsenal may appear to be more varied than I'm giving it credit for, but in practice, I felt none of the customization options changed the core of how Nero plays, and made his levels a slog to get through. Unlike Dante, Nero only has one sword and one gun to mess around with, a revolver, which never felt like it did enough damage to be worthwhile, and a sword that plays very similar to Dante's primary one. The variety and distinguishing factor of Nero's style comes in the form of Devil Breaker, his mechanical arm. The primary function of Devil Breaker is to pull enemies towards you, which was helpful without Dante's dashes to make maneuvering around the environment more simple. There are several variations of the Devil Breaker to choose from, each with their own additional abilities and properties to shake things up. But in all my time using different ones, I never found much use for any of them beyond using their distinct moves to add up to the style points that began to stagnate should you rely on the same moves repeatedly. None of them broke up the monotony of Nero's playstyle, and that monotony wasn't helped by DMC5's relatively uninspired enemies and encounters. To this day, I still remember some of the fights of DMC3 and how satisfying that can be, especially with the game's unrelenting difficulty. Here, most of what DMC5 offers feels so tossed away that almost none of the fights left an impression on me. Most certainly, nothing I'll remember years from now. DMC5's one saving grace when it comes to interesting combat design is V, who plays unlike anything the series has done before. Unlike Nero and Dante, who are powerhouses of human-demon hybrids, V is a frail man who walks around with a cane. Instead of doing the fighting himself, V has to rely on 3 demons he is able to summon: a bird, a panther, and a giant. Each of these 3 deals damages and combos similar to Dante's and Nero's, but they do it at a distance from V himself, and can be taken out by enemy attacks just like any other character. Managing all these characters at once captured my interest in V at the outset, and anytime I was given the option to play as him over Nero, I took it. It may have felt antithetical to a lot of DMC's known conventions, but it brought a new layer of challenge and strategy I wasn't getting anywhere else in DMC5. While its narrative is messy, its characters are given some of their weakest and most well-worn material to work with, and only one of its 3 playable characters brings anything new to the table. I have a hard time saying DMC5 is bad. It's just unexceptional in the face of games that have revitalized the genre as recently as the past 2 years. God of War, Bayonetta 2, and Nier Automata all stand out as stellar modern examples of what the action genre is capable of. While Devil May Cry 5 feels like a relic of a time when it was nearly uncontested in that space. There's clearly a passion for this series instilled in DMC5, but it feels like all of it amounts to reminiscing about its past more than paving a way for a brighter future.
It's been a while since I used my brain this much.